Well, again, I think you're in a very interesting. I know you do more than just cannabis, but we're going to talk a little bit about your cannabis practice because it is new for people, and people are interested in what does that mean exactly. As I mentioned, used to be criminal lawyers were involved in cannabis. Not too much anymore.
Right.
It's not really illegal in most places. I noticed that
It still is.
Yeah, in a lot of places.
It's still illegal. But then, so a lot of people will still ask me about criminal law, and I'll be like, excuse me, I used to be a financial lawyer and a stockbroker, and I still am a financial lawyer, but the financial aspects of it just have to be related to this particular plant. And I don't understand the criminal ramifications of it. If you want me to, sue on a breach of contract because somebody's done something wrong, fine, no problem. You got arrested for going over something, let me call a guy for you. I'll call Steven Comey.
Well, we have a lot of we have several criminal attorneys that appear on the show a lot. We talk a lot about Second Amendment rights, First Amendment, all the Constitution. You and I have talked a little bit about the Constitution and how important that is, not only to me but to everybody. And but we'll get into that in a later segment. But when you talk about, I noticed that you do work not only in Illinois but around the country, don't you?
Yeah, right now there's a real exciting Ohio dispensary round that's going on. It's going to involve some lottery hacking, just like the Illinois dispensary lottery did. Mm-hmm. And then we have a lotto segment that's going on in Kittery, Maine. I've got a client out there that we're going to try to help get a dispo. And then New Jersey, I guess, just handed out
a whole bunch of their litigation results after 2 years. And so if you're thinking about getting in a lawsuit because you were an unsuccessful dispensary applicant, maybe in 2 years, you'll also be awarded a license or some type of settlement, just like they did in New Jersey. But the cannabis law practice as itself is very interesting and bizarre because of this hybrid legal status, but then also because high finance and corporate law and doing capital raises and structured financing and then also very complex transactions, some of which may end up in court.
It's just a complicated area of the law. And that's before you talk about the regulatory compliance aspect of it.
Or even the tax aspect, because, I've talked a lot about the tax aspect of cannabis, for a couple of years now, and how that is all muddled up in federal law and state law. And and that makes an interesting discussion.
Absolutely. I'm working on a program from the National Business Institute for
a CLE that I'm doing on bankruptcy and cannabis. And it's just another one of those issues where it's taxed differently. You can't file bankruptcy for it. And so you get taxed a lot at the state level. And then you also get double taxed at the federal level because of its illegality. And then if you try to get relief from all this liability, well, you can't. It's a tax lien. So bankruptcy wouldn't help.
But
let me interrupt you a little.
You're not even allowed to go into bankruptcy.
Let me interrupt you a little bit because I help people with bankruptcy. A lot of times my stuff is a lot to do with taxes, but this is an interesting, and I never really thought about that issue. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that why? Because I'm interested in it. So
if you are a cannabis company contemplating file for bankruptcy, don't.
Because you can't. And so if you try to file, the federal government will not want to be complicit in its own crimes. And so don't ask the federal government for relief for violating its crimes. And the bankruptcy trustees will dismiss you out and they'll say that you have unclean hands and all sorts of stuff. And then, a lot of states, and Illinois doesn't have this yet. Michigan does. Michigan has the Uniform Receivers Act. So you can appoint a receiver to govern the real estate or whatever the business is and then sell it to maximize its value. We kind of have a receivership statute here in Illinois, but it's in conjunction to the mortgage foreclosure law. So during a mortgage foreclosure, you can either be named as mortgagee in possession of the property or have a receiver appointed, which is more popular in the Chicagoland area.
And then that receiver can manage the property in lieu of a United States bankruptcy trustee who's just don't ask us to help you violate our own laws. And by the way, you're not allowed to deduct that on your taxes,
Okay, so I'm laughing because these are all areas of the law that I'm fairly familiar with, foreclosure law, bankruptcy, taxes. This is all stuff that I help people with all the time. And I think you're the first one I've ever discussed about bankruptcy, and I never really considered that issue. But that's an interesting issue. That is something.
Well, yeah. And think about this, because this can happen. You can
set up your dispensary and not really understand how you were doing it. And so you elected the wrong tax status. And then you handed out, handsome salaries for not just your inventory manager, but for all your bud tenders, and then all the general manager, and then the administrative staff. And you have a great marketing plan, and you deduct all of those like as an ordinary and necessary expense. And then you get audited in 3 years, and they disallow all of that. And they say all the taxes are due, and all the penalties for not paying them are also due. And so suddenly you have this huge tax bill, and you're like, oh crap, I'm broke. I'm ruined. I wonder if I can file
bankruptcy. No, you cannot.
Is this so? Obviously, you're coming up with a scenario that you've seen before. Is that right?
Oh yeah, it's the IRS audits cannabis companies at 20x the rate that they audit regular businesses, and so like not 20% higher, 20
times higher. It's like the average company has about a 1% chance of being audited in any given year. The average cannabis company has a 20% chance of being audited in any given year. So very often it's always it's when, not if your cannabis company will be audited. Are you going to be ready? And it's just so bizarre. So like when you're doing financial models and other things, you're just always so sensitive to your allocations of whether or not that expense can be pushed back into inventory, or is it trafficking, because of the federal prohibition against deducting the costs of trafficking illegal drugs. It was a wonderful development in the tax code in the early 80s when a cocaine dealer who probably hired a very shifty
and very smart criminal lawyer, and then he got a tax opinion on it.
Well, let me interrupt you, because I'm very familiar with that case and how this came about, and we'll talk about that later in this next segment. But first, tell people how they can find you if they're looking to get into the cannabis business and they need an attorney. That's you. How do they contact you?
They can Google cannabis lawyer, and I'll be result one. I don't pay for ads yet in Illinois, and I don't really need to pay for ads in other states either. I answer a lot of questions on my law blog, CannabisIndustryLawyer.com. Or they can find my firm, Collateral Base, by Googling Collateral Base and go to that, collateralbase.com.